Welcome back, everybody, to the Just Talk Hoops podcast. Um, I know I didn't get an episode out last week for the off season. I'm just doing every other week, just because I don't have a ton to talk about. But it should be a really fun episode for you guys today. I'm going to be talking about my 2026 season standings predictions. So we're going to go through each of the conferences. We're going to say who I think are going to make the playoffs, make the play-in, and then miss entirely. I'll give my reasoning for all of these. I did this last year. It was my first episode actually that I ever did of this podcast. I did both this and the awards in the same video that year, which ended up being like an hour and 40 minutes long, which I don't think anybody really wants to sit there and listen to me talk for an hour and 40 minutes. I mean, maybe, but I'll just make that another episode. I think there's enough content there for me to just make a whole nother episode of it. So I'll do award predictions, all NBA teams, all defensive teams in the next episode, which will be 2 weeks from now. So not next week, but the week after that. And yeah, so we'll just get started with this. Once again, Just Talk Hoops on Instagram. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, blah, 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 anything like that. Title-runners.net if you want to read some of my stuff. I haven't gotten anything out super recently just because I've been crazy busy with school and all that stuff. But it's there's still some great articles from me and from other writers. So, and today we're rocking the Houston Rockets Robert Horry 1995 championship jersey. So, one of my favorite pulls. I actually bought this while I was in Greece. There was like an NBA store in Greece that I just found, and I was like, oh well, let me look around, and they had all these jerseys in there and like this cool stuff, and I was like, well, let me grab a Robert Horry jersey. Why not? Anyway, we'll get right into our episode. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, leave a like, smash that subscribe button. You know how it is. All right. So getting into it, we're going to start with the Eastern Conference just because that's a little less competitive. So it's a little easier. I mean, it wasn't easy to decide the teams just because there's a lot of teams in kind of that same caliber tier, which is okay, but not great. But it is less competitive than the Western Conference, and there's less teams that I think could jump way above where I have them, right? Like with the Western Conference, teams that I have at 10 and like 9 or 10 could jump up into that like 5 or 6 range, maybe even higher than that. In the Eastern Conference, I feel like it's pretty much like they're in the range they're in unless something drastic happens. But I think I don't know. I mean, last year I felt pretty confident about my picks. I mean, as confident as I am about anything, and they didn't pan out at all. Like I had the Cavs being in the play-in because I just thought there was a ton of like unknowns with that team, but I think it's impossible to predict. It's impossible to predict with any degree of accuracy. Like I can guess, but it's just you never know what's gonna happen. Like you can't predict the injuries, you can't predict a lot of this stuff. But anyway, we'll start with the bottom. And I'm a Nets fan. Anyone who's been listening to my episodes knows that I am a Nets fan. I try and keep the bias out of here. I have the Nets as the worst team in the NBA. Well, in the Eastern Conference, which pretty much means the NBA because the Eastern Conference is significantly worse than the Western Conference. So if you're worse in the East, you're worse in the West. I just think, like, I love Jordy Fernandez. I think that he's a great coach. He had a great year last year. If any coach of these bottom teams is going to just coach their way into like a 12th or 13th seed, it's going to be Jordy Fernandez. I think he's absolutely incredible. I think it'll be really interesting to see what he does with the rookies, what he does with all these players. Like the Nets have got like, I don't even know, like 20-something players on the roster right now, which is absolutely insane. Obviously, that's not all going to stay coming into the season, but it'll be really interesting to see like who makes it through training camp, who makes it through and gets actually rotational minutes. Because right now, it's like anyone could get minutes. You know, if you play really well in training camp or you play really well in preseason, congratulations, you could be starting. And if you struggle, there's no one who's really safe from getting their minutes clipped a little bit. You know, guys like Claxton, Cam Thomas, and MPJ, they're a little safer, but there's no guarantee that they're going to get opportunity, you know, and I think that's sort of fun, right? That's sort of fun. We've got 5 first-round picks on that team. I think there's a lot of upside. There's a lot of upside on some of those guys, right? I think a lot of those guys, if they jump out and have a great rookie year, or I mean, even some of the guys who are going into a second or third year, guys like Kobe Buffkin, who they brought in from other teams and said, hey, we'll give you more opportunity in Brooklyn. I think there's a lot of upside with those guys, and they could make a jump. But I just think more likely than not, it's just not going to happen. And there's just not the talent on this team to be above the 13th or 12th seed. I think that's their ceiling. And like I said, Jordy Fernandez could make this team a lot better, but my expectations are low. Which maybe I'm just doing that on purpose so that I'm more excited when we win a game. But they're in the lottery odds. Like they're trying to win the sweepstakes, right? Right above the Nets, there are three certain things in life. It's death, taxes, and the Wizards being one of the worst teams in the NBA. They've been down here like forever since the John Wall days. Ooh, shout out to John Wall retiring. This happened a couple weeks ago, so I might have already talked about it. But John Wall was great. Unfortunately, wasn't able to win a whole lot with the Wizards because it's the Wizards. But I do like some of the players they have in Washington right now, right? Bilal Coulibaly, Alex Sarr. I know Alex Sarr has got a lot to work on, right? He's extremely inefficient for a big man. He shot, 40-something% from the field as a 7'2" player, which is concerning. But he's got a lot of tools that you love, right? Like the upside of that shot blocking, of that size, of that, 3-point shooting. Is it a great ability right now? No, but it is there. So it's like they've got guys that could definitely do something this season, but it's just not enough to win them a lot of games. You know what I mean? It's just not enough talent to consistently win basketball games. And it doesn't move me. It doesn't move me. I think that we could see some of those young guys jump, and maybe we see this team jump a little bit, but they just don't have the talent. Even in this weaker Eastern Conference, they're just not ready. I think they're not on a bad trajectory to be ready, but they're just not there yet. Right above them, this feels like it's the same every year. It's the Charlotte Hornets. The Hornets, the thing that's so interesting about them is they have the potential to be so much higher than this, right? You look at guys like LaMelo Ball, you look at guys like Brandon Miller, you look at guys like Con Knipple coming into his rookie year, who I think should be really solid based off of his summer league performances and college and stuff. And you look at those players and you're like, yeah, this team should win more basketball games. This team should win more, especially in a weaker Eastern Conference where they have the opportunity to jump up a little bit, but they haven't been able to capitalize that for years. And I don't really see a reason why they would this year, right? If they haven't been in the past. You look at this team and you're like, roster-wise, they're not terrible. Are they a contender? No, they're not even close to a contender. They're not even really close to a playoff team. But they don't seem like a bottom three team in the Eastern Conference. But they are. Every single year it feels like they are. So I just think I can't bank on LaMelo Ball being healthy, a guy who's shown a pattern of constantly getting his ankles injured, which is unfortunate for him, and I don't wish injury on anybody, but it's just the pattern, right? And I can't expect him to be healthy. I can't expect this roster to perform well without him. I can't even really expect them to perform well with him. Even if he plays really well, or even if some of these other guys play really well, it oftentimes doesn't matter. They oftentimes lose anyway. So I can't trust that team to be any better than that. And I think their ceiling could be a play-in appearance. But I think their floor is the worst team in the Eastern Conference. And it's like, are they ever going to break out of this cycle? I don't know. It feels like they've been in this forever. Like the Nets and the Wizards. At least the Nets had something going for them at some point. I'm just trying to make myself feel better. Right above the Hornets, I've got the Bulls, so they finally break out of the play-in. Now they break out in the losing direction, right? They lose more games than, they're not at 500 anymore, or slightly below 500. But they do finally break out of that play-in, which they've been trying to do for years. And I just think this is the year where that happens, right? I just think they didn't get significantly better than last year, that's for sure. They don't have a whole lot of talent. I think the other teams above them are all better, and I think this team's just not very good, right? It's not very good. Is it very bad? No, it's not really that either. Um, but I do think this isn't a bad thing for the Bulls, right? If they could keep this roster together, they don't have to just tank it and be like, okay, take all our good players, right? I thought Kobe White, Josh Giddey, they performed pretty well last year, so you don't want to get rid of them just for the sake of losing more games. We've seen that not work. But you look at that team and you're like, well, I'm not moved, but that's fine because if they could get a good draft pick, right? If they could finally get into those higher lottery odds and they could bring someone really talented in, then I think this team maybe could look really solid in a couple years, right? Modest Buzelis, Noah Senge, these are guys that have solid upside, right? And they could maybe become something in the NBA once given the right opportunity. And just I think this year they're not going to be great, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for the Bulls, right? Like that's like the Hornets consistently being this bad. You're like, well, are they ever going to figure it out? Like if they're bad again this year, even after bringing in all these rookies and like giving them time to develop, it's like, well, it's a little scary, right? The Nets, Wizards, and Bulls, I think they're all okay being in this bottom five. And the final team that's going to miss the playoffs in the East, at least I think, is the Toronto Raptors. I think the Raptors are a team that they have good players, right, and they have a good roster. But I just don't think they're over the teams above them. I think they could jump up, right? I think they're one of those teams that their ceiling is a little bit higher than the 11 seed. But I can't trust it, right? We'll finally get to see how Ingram fits into this lineup, right? How Ingram plays after missing they trade for him at the trade deadline, and then he missed all last year, which they knew was going to happen. But now we finally get to see him actually play. We get to see him actually do his thing in Toronto. I think that could work really well, right? You've got Barrett, you've got Ingram, you've got Barnes as your forwards, and that's a solid core, right? And I think that there's some solid players there, so I could see them jumping up a little bit. I don't see them being great. I don't see them, making the playoffs, but I think they could jump up into that play-in, maybe compete for the playoffs. And it's just not enough for me right now to put them into the play-in mix. I think they could get there, right? I wouldn't be surprised if they did get there, but I just think this is a good spot to put them right now when I'm just not sure if they'll achieve that ceiling that I predict for them, right? Right above them, we've got the play-in. So now these are teams 10 through 7. A lot of this in the Eastern Conference especially is just like dealing with injuries. Like the team's not necessarily bad, but they're dealing with injuries, which is the case for the 10 seed, which is to me the Boston Celtics, right? I think Tatum being out for so long really hurts this team. It really does because he's their star player, right? He's their best player. We've seen him be consistently healthy throughout his career. Unfortunately, he tears his Achilles last year. It's really sad. If he comes back late in the year, maybe, like he comes back in the playing or like a little before the playing just so he can get back into playing shape. And then he's there in the plan. I think this team could make a push, right? But him being out hurts them. Their depth not being great because they had to get rid of Drew Holiday. They had to get rid of Kristaps Porzingis. That hurts them. They got rid of Drew and they brought in Anthony Simons, which I don't think was a bad pickup. I think Simons could play some quality minutes for them. But I think it doesn't really move me. And then Porzingis they gave away for basically a bag of chips. And that, like, their center position is absolutely horrendous right now. I do expect them to bring back Horford, which would help. I could see them maybe jumping up to that 7th or 8th spot. But as of right now, I believe they haven't brought back Al Horford yet. And right now, their depth is really bad, right? Like they don't look good, right? Like they're missing so much, partially because that injury, partially because of the cap rules that kind of dismantled that roster. I don't expect a lot in the regular season. Maybe they make some noise in the playoffs if Tatum comes back, but I don't expect much in the regular season. Right above them, we've got the Heat. The Heat are one of the few teams in this play-in mix that I have in this play-in mix that they're not here just because of injuries. They're here because the Heat are always in the play-in. I think the addition of Norman Powell actually really helps. I think it helps that they have someone besides Hero who can, create his own shot. We saw Norman Powell have a really good year last year in LA. I thought that that was a good pickup, especially since Bam hasn't really developed into that offensive player that I think a lot of people, especially Heat fans, were hoping he would. I think they're still lacking that guy to me, right? Like they don't have their number one guy. They don't have that star. Tyler Hero had a really good year last year, but I don't think I don't think that his play style really lends itself to him being a number one option star, right? Like that's not what I think he should be. I think he's more of a Cam Thomas caliber almost, where it's like he's great at scoring. So if you give him the ball and let him score, he'll get his, but he's just not gonna he's not gonna win you a whole lot of games as your number one option. And like Bam to me, he's really good. He's really solid center. He does a lot of things, but he's not enough for me to say he's anywhere close to a number one option, right? I think we could see like I did really like the lineup of Khalil Ware and Bam together. I would like to see them play that next year. Like I would love to see a lineup of Hero, Powell, Wiggins, Bam, and Ware. I think that would be their best lineup. But I think this team could be anywhere from 10-7, but I don't see them jumping out of the play-in, and I don't really see them dropping out. Unless the injury bug can always kill teams, but I think that team, their ceiling and their floor are pretty close. They're probably just a playing team, right? Right above them, this is another team that's just like the Celtics. It's just injuries, right? It's the Sixers. The thing is, the Sixers roster is so good that when you just look at it on paper, right? You got Tyrese Maxey, who's had a really good year, or who's had really good years since coming into the league, right? He's been really solid, especially in these past couple of years. Embiid, who was an MVP not that long ago, right? Unfortunately, his knees have turned to dust, so it's just not something that you can rely on. And I'll talk more about that in a second. You've got guys like Paul George, and you've got guys like Jared McCain, who performed really well last year before getting injured. Quentin Grimes, who performed really well. VJ Edgecombe, the rookie, who I think shows a lot of promise. And I think this roster looks really good on paper. But then you look at the fact that Joel Embiid's knees are made of paper. Paul George is not doing great in the injury department either. You look at last year, they were just getting killed by injuries, right? And I think I just can't look at those players and say, oh, they're going to be healthy this year, right? Embiid has shown a pattern of consistently getting injured, and I don't think his body can take it for much longer. And I'm really hoping that he can. I'm really hoping that he can play this year and that he can prove a lot of people wrong. But it's just difficult for me to say that he will, right? Can he? Maybe, but will he? Probably not, right? And I think it's just unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. It's a really unfortunate situation for Sixers fans and for just basketball fans in general. You never want to see a great player get injured and not, it's just unfortunate. It's just really unfortunate. But I do think that their roster looks really good, right? Like I said, those guys like McCain and Edgecombe and Grimes, who is maybe still sitting in restricted free agency. I really haven't been keeping up recently. He could have gotten signed by them, but he might still be sitting there. But I think their injury damage control is just going to be a little better, right? When they lose Embiid, they're going to be able to be like, okay, that hurts, but we can still do something. Like they should be planning for not having Joel Embiid and not having Paul George and not even having Tyrese Maxey, right? So if they could just avoid some of those injuries, then I think this team could look fine. I just think they're not going to look great, and just because of those injuries. So maybe they could stay really healthy, and then I could see their ceiling being all the way up to the third seed in the East, right? But their floor is missing the playoffs entirely, and this team should be too good to miss the playoffs, but they're not. The Pacers are right above the Sixers, so it's another situation where they've just got a guy who's out. Halliburton tearing his Achilles in the finals is one of the saddest things I've ever seen as a basketball fan. Miles Turner leaving was unfortunate for them as well. Right now, you look at their center depth and you're like, I don't know how confident I feel in Jay Huff starting center minutes. Right, I love Jay Huff, Nuggets legend. But and he had a really good year last year. But is he a consistent starting center? You know, I don't know about that, right? So missing those guys is going to hurt a lot. But I do expect like Ben Matherin and Andrew Nemhard to take a big jump, and I think Pascal can still, he can mitigate some of that damage, right? He can still come in and be really good. I think that they won't be as good as they were last year. I think that's pretty obvious, right? You're missing your starting center. You're missing your lead playmaker, right? One of the main reasons that offense works so well. But they've still got the talent. They've still got a lot of talent. And they've still just got the cohesion as a unit, right? I think Rick Carlisle's a really good coach. I think he's brought them together into this kind of, it's a team, literally just a team. Like the ball movement is absolutely incredible. They play really well as a unit. So if they can just have some guys step up and kind of fill those roles, right? If you can have Andrew Nemhard and Ben Matherin be consistent starters, and maybe even, like I think those guys could both be really good on the offensive end this upcoming year. I think that despite missing guys like the Celtics and the Sixers, or the Sixers, we don't even know if they're going to be missing guys, but let's be for real, they're going to be. They've got like a backup. They've got something that they can lean on if they're missing those guys that I don't think, like the Celtics don't have that, right? The Celtics are kind of scrambling because they lost so much in this offseason, partially from injuries, partially from just losing players. I think the Pacers just have a better system for combating that. You know what I mean? So now we get into the playoffs. After the Pacers, we get into the playoffs. Like, they won enough games. Congratulations. You don't even need to play in the play-in. You're in the playoffs. Honestly, some of these teams aren't really playoff caliber teams. Like number 6, the Bucks. I think this is their ceiling. I think the 5 or 6 seed is their ceiling. I think I could see them dropping all the way down to like 10, maybe even 11, but I doubt that, right? That would only be like Giannis gets injured. You can never count out Giannis, right? He's, in my opinion, the second best player in the NBA. He's absolutely insane. He's a force of nature. We've seen it for years that he can do a lot with not a ton of players around him, but like this year is a really bad supporting cast, right? Last year when him and Dame played together, it was like, okay, there's something here, right? When Dame did play, he had a really good season last year. Now they dropped him, right? They waived him. They're still paying him $22 million a year, but they waived him. And they used the money that they saved to bring in Miles Turner and Gary Harris. Now, Miles Turner is a really good player, like I was just talking about with the Pacers. Like, he's a starting center caliber player for sure. Great stretch big, great rim protector, not a great rebounder, but that's fine. He's not a second option though, right? Like, he's not the guy that you're like, who's our first best player? Giannis, great. Second best player, Miles Turner. Gary Harris is a guy who I just don't see being that impactful. So you lose Dame and bring in Miles Turner and Gary Harris. It's not a great flip, right? You're not loving that. I get Dame wouldn't have played, but the roster around Giannis is just terrible this year. And I don't know if I can trust that team to win a lot of games. I think they could be even worse than this. Like, I think the Bucks could be well under, 500 maybe, right? Like, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here just because Giannis is so ridiculously insane, and I can't rely on any of those teams below the Bucks either, right? Like teams like the Pacers and the Sixers, I can't confidently say that they will be better than the Milwaukee Bucks, especially since they've got so many injury issues right now. But like the Bucks could be a lot worse than this. And I don't think they could be much better. So it's an unfortunate situation. Like the 6 seed isn't terrible, but for the Bucks, it's not good either. Right above them, finally escaping the play-in, I've got the Atlanta Hawks. They escaped play-in jail like the Bulls did, but they actually went up instead of down. I think they just improved a lot this offseason. I think that the addition of Porzingis is great for them, while still keeping Onyeka Okongwu. They didn't give up much at all for Porzingis, which is great for them. Nikhil Alexander Walker is also a great pickup for them, I think. So you look at that roster and you're like, okay, so we've still got Trae Young, right? Who's one of the better point guards in the league. You've still got Dyson Daniels, who had an absolutely incredible year, especially on the defensive end of things. You've got Jalen Johnson, who I expect to take a huge jump this year. I expect him to be an all-star caliber player. Zachary Richichet, the first overall pick from last year, who had a great year, and I expect him to have another great year. And then now you still got a Kongwu, and then now you're bringing in Porzingis, who I know he's got some injury issues, but when he plays is really impactful. Even when he doesn't play, you've got a Kongwu off the bench, so you're not like, oh well, he's out. I guess we're starting. Who knows? And only God knows who the hell we're starting now. Like some of those teams, like the Celtics, who lost Porzingis and are now like Luka Garza, welcome to the starting five. You know, but the Hawks, they've got a guy off the bench on the Okongwu who I think could, play those minutes and still be impactful. So I like when I don't see any of their players really regressing, right? I think their roster's still young enough that their players aren't really going to regress, and I expect a lot of them to jump, which just is like they're going to look really good if they can if they can get that to work, if they can get Porzingis to be healthy, and then Nikhil Alexander Walker, I think, just a really good role player, then they're going to look solid. Now, I don't know if this makes them a contender or anything, but I think they could be a second-round team, which is better than they've been in the past. Especially since the East is just so weak this year, they've just got a lot of opportunity. Right above them, we've got the Detroit Pistons. The Detroit Pistons, Detroit basketball, as a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference. It's beautiful. I'm honestly rooting for the Pistons this year, right? I am a Nets fan, and then after that, I'm a Nuggets fan since I live in Denver. But, if one of those teams isn't going to be good, I want the Pistons to be good. And the Nets aren't going to be good in the East. In the Eastern Conference, I'm kind of riding with the Pistons. Cade has shown he's a star, right? Cade had an incredible year last year. We saw that. He had a great regular season and then had a really, really solid series against the Knicks, right? The Pistons gave the Knicks some trouble, and the Knicks ended up going to a conference final. So it's like, okay, this Pistons team might be more ready for the postseason than we thought. Other guys, Jalen Duren, Asar Thompson look good. Jaden Ivey should be coming back this year. We'll see how he fits into this lineup. Karis LeVert, they brought in during the offseason, so that'll also get him some bench scoring. And I just think this team shows a lot of promise. They're young, so I think a lot of their guys are going to take a jump. And the East is worse, so they can just kind of, I think there's just a spot up there that the Pistons can fill. And I think they're ready to do that. You know what I mean? Right above the Pistons, I've got the Orlando Magic. I think the Magic bringing in Desmond Bane was an absolutely incredible move for Orlando. What was their biggest issue last year? 3-point shooting, right? They were literally the worst 3-point shooting team in the league. They needed someone to come in and consistently knock down jump shots. So they were okay, we'll give up 4 first-rounders for Desmond Bane, which is a bit much, but it's not entirely not worth it, because he's a really good shooter, and he's a confident shooter, which is something they needed, right? When you're looking at 2 stars, your 2 star players are Franz Wagner and Apollo Banchero, both of whom are really, really good players, but not great shooters and not super confident 3-point shooters, then bringing in a guy like Desmond Bane alongside them really helps, I think. That defense should still be really good. I don't think Bane, brings down their defense a whole lot. Guys like Jalen Suggs is still there, right? They've got Paolo and Franz, who hopefully Franz, who can hopefully stay healthy, right? We saw a lot of them. We saw a lot of time missed by both those guys last year. So if they can stay healthy and then have those guys like Desmond Bane, I think they brought in Tyus Jones too. Unless I'm mistaken. Then I expect them to look better than they did last year. And plus, same thing with the Pistons. It's teams like the Pacers and the Celtics kind of fallen out of that top tier because of injuries opens the door for these teams that have been waiting for their chance to burst forward and win more games and then be a higher seed. So I think the Magic and the Pistons, like they could fail at this, like they could try and reach this level and then kind of fall short, but I don't like. I think they are a level above the teams like the Hawks and the Bucks who still got some roster issues. Um, and I think these teams, honestly, they could look really solid. I think they could be really fun to watch next year too. And then, okay, the top two teams in the East, I feel like this is a pretty easy. Like, I don't really see. Like, I could see them flip flopping with each other, but I don't really see anyone else taking these spots. I've got the New York Knicks and the Cleveland Cavaliers. I've got the Knicks at two, Cavs at one. Knicks are coming off a great playoff team, great playoff run, right? They had an incredible year. Jalen Brunson had an absolutely incredible year. I think, and the roster has not gotten worse, right? They haven't lost a whole lot. They've gained some stuff, even bringing in like Gershon Yabusele, Jordan Clarkson. I feel like there's someone I'm forgetting about, but whatever. Like they haven't lost a whole lot. I honestly think that the Knicks are better roster wise than the Cavs this year, right? I think that we're gonna look at the Knicks and be like they're a better team, but I just think it's going to be they're just going to have to adapt to having a new coach, right? Which I think can take a little time. So I think we could see the Cavs get off to a hot start, and the Knicks kind of have some like speed bumps as they're trying to figure out the Mike Brown system. Um, and maybe not. That's just something I could see happening. So I have the Knicks at two. I think they're going to be really close to the Cavs. I think the two teams will be separated by just a few games. I think the Cavs, they're still that same team from last year, right, that performed so well. I just think that they overperformed a little bit last year. I don't expect them to have as legendary of a season, right? Especially, they're missing Ty Jerome off the bench, missing. That's about all they lost because I was gonna say Karis LeVert, but they moved on from him in the middle of last year. Um, but they've still got a great team, right? You've got that core together still. You still got Garland, you've got Mitchell, you got Mobley and Allen, and then guys like Hunter. Like you'll have still a really solid roster. I can't remember, was Garland suffering with an injury? Like I remember he. I'm not sure if he's expected to because I thought he like missed some time in the playoffs last year. Maybe I'm getting mixed up with other years, but if Garland's out for a chunk of the season at the start, which I have no idea about, I'd have to look into that. But then I could see the Knicks jumping them. I think these teams are pretty interchangeable, but I think they are pretty easily the one and two in the East. Um, so that's the Eastern Conference. Obviously, they're not incredible, right? The there's only a few teams. There's only maybe two teams that I could see actually contending for a championship, right? I think the Knicks and the Cavs both have a chance to go and win a championship. Other teams just either they're suffering from injuries or suffering from not being a very good basketball team, and I think we could see some movement in there, right? I think the East could be kind of a weird conference because it'll be like, well, the Bucks, they've got a weird supporting cast that's not working out. They drop a ton, and then all of a sudden you see a team like the Raptors or something like that, and you're like, the Raptors are going to make the playoffs this year, right? Like you could see that happen, but I wouldn't bank on it just because of the fact that it's like, I don't know, like I can't bring myself to predict something crazy happening. So that's the best I've got for predictions. I feel more confident about them than last year, but not great, right? Like, there's a chance that one of the teams I said was like, oh, yeah, I think they'll make the playoffs this year. They're like the worst team in the league. I'm like, shit. Western Conference, now, this is a bloodbath. Western Conference is absolutely insane. It's just every man for himself. It's like, it's insane. We'll start with the teams who can't quite cut it in the Western Conference, right? We got the Utah Jazz at the bottom. As always, the Utah Jazz are at the bottom. I know, not always, right? Like they had some good years with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, but since then, it's pretty much been always the bottom. There's some promise in guys on that team, right? Keontae George, Bryce Sensabaugh, who had a really good summer league, and then their draft pick Ace Bailey, right, who they took at 5, who talent wise is one of the best players in the league. Or well, no, I'm jumping the gun a little bit there. One of the best players in the draft, right? You just look at that projection, you look at that talent. A lot of people were saying Ace Bailey is the third best player in that draft. It's not a good team though. Like I know there's promise in those guys, but it's just not enough for me to say, okay, well, like they're gonna win this year. They're gonna do better because the conference is so rough, and they are just not quite good enough to be good. Right above them, no surprises here either. I've got the New Orleans Pelicans. I was a Pelicans believer for years. I was like, no, they've got a good core, Zion and Brandon Ingram, and I believed in the DeJounte Murray and CJ McCollum pairing, and I was like, they've got something, right? I've gotten off the hype train, which means, of course, this is going to be the year they finally fulfill it. But I'm done projecting them to be like, well, they might be a sneaky playing team, you know, which they were one of the years, right? But I can't bring myself to constantly be like, yeah, I believe that Zion will be healthy. And I know we see the pictures of him like, oh, well, he looks a lot slimmer this year. But the problem with him isn't weight, right? It's not weight. It's the fact that his body cannot. I mean, that is part of the problem, right? I think weight was one of his issues for a couple of years. But I think the bigger problem is just his body cannot handle playing basketball the way he does, right? It's difficult for Zion to play the way he does, and it's just unfortunate. Like I would love for Zion to be healthy. I would love for him to have a great year and for the Pelicans to have a great year. I just don't think it's enough for the Western Conference. Maybe in the East, but I just don't think it's enough, right? And bringing in, they changed a lot this offseason, right? Jordan Poole, they brought in a couple of rookies, right? And Derek Queen and then Jeremiah Fears. They, they've made some good moves, or at least we'll see. They've at least made some moves. They're trying to change stuff, but I just don't know if it's enough. I don't know if it's enough to make them look a lot better. And with bringing in those rookies, though, you do look at them and you're like, well, at least we've got something for the future, right? Guys like Trey Murphy, who's performed really well, those rookies, and then if you are like, well, Zion just doesn't cut it anymore, we can't keep paying this injury-prone guy, then you've still got a lot to build on, which I like. But for this year, I just don't see them doing a whole lot. Right above them, I've got the Kings, so they're back to missing the playoffs, right? They've made it 1 year, and then since then haven't done anything. They lost Fox last year, which I think hurt them a lot. I just don't trust the team led by DeMar and Sabonis. They're both really good players, but I just don't trust them to lead a playoff team in the Western Conference. They just, I was hoping for a Keegan Murray jump last year. I thought I'm a believer in Keegan Murray. I have his jersey, and I like Keegan Murray, but he didn't really jump last year. Guys like Keon Ellis, who I think is really solid. They've got solid players. Their issue isn't they don't have any solid players. They just don't have enough for me to be like, yeah, they're gonna beat out some of these teams above them. Especially since last year, they looked okay, but not great. And then I think this team isn't better than last year. If anything, it might be a little worse. Right above the Kings, we've got a team that's definitely worse than last year. I've got the Phoenix Suns. They didn't even make the playoffs last year with Kevin Durant, and now they don't have Kevin Durant, right? They gave him up to the Suns. They bring in Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks. I think those guys are okay, right? Jalen Green has been pretty consistently inconsistent throughout his career. Dillon Brooks is an okay role player, but neither of them is Kevin Durant. And I mean, Devin Booker, I expect to have another great year, right? Devin Booker has had great years throughout his career. I just saw something about he's going into year 11 and he's only 28 years old, which is nuts. But he's great, and I like some of their additions, right? Come on, Maluwach as their center. I think that's a good pickup. Mark Williams as well. That's a good pickup. But I can't bring myself to be like, they're going to make the play-in because I just don't trust that roster. If they didn't look good with Kevin Durant last year, I don't think they'll look good without Kevin Durant this year. Above the Suns, just one spot out of making the playoff play-in, and I tried to find a way to convince myself that they would make the play-in, but I can't. It's the Portland Trailblazers. I do think they're underrated, right? I think that in the East they could be maybe top 7 or 8 team. But when you look at when you look at the Western Conference teams above them, I just don't think I can say, oh yeah, the Blazers are going to be better than that team because they probably won't. I do expect a jump from like Donovan Clingan and Tumani Kamara, so maybe we could see them, have a good year. Like maybe we could see the Blazers really benefit off of that. I saw that Scoot Henderson's going to be out for a good bit of time, so that does hurt them. But I don't expect them to be a whole lot better than anybody above them. Maybe they could jump up. Maybe they could have a really good year, especially if other teams get injured and they don't. But I can't say that I expect, I can't expect much out of the Blazers. But I do think they looked really solid last year. Maybe not good, but solid. Right above, so now we get into the plan, right? So Blazers, first team out of the plan. We've got in the plan as the 10th seed, I've got the Golden State Warriors. Now, I think the Warriors had a terrible offseason. They really did. They didn't do anything. They literally, right now, the Warriors have like 8 or 9 total players on the roster, which is like, what are you doing? Like, how are you not bringing in anyone else? Because it's not like that team is perfect, right? It's not like, well, we just won the championship. No, you actually just lost in the second round. Like, I understand that they just went to the second round and looked really solid against the team that ended up going to the conference finals, right? And they beat the second seed last year, but I don't think you can rely on that. I think that the star power is still there, right? They've still got Steph Curry, so you can never count him out. Jimmy Butler, who played solidly with the Warriors last year, right? Draymond Green, who's still impactful. But I don't think that I can bring myself to be like, yeah, they got better, because they didn't. Their roster's not getting any younger. They're getting older. Other teams around them are getting better. And they're just sitting there complacently, not doing anything. So I feel like, like if they were a play-in team last year, and now some of those other teams who had a play-in team, who were play-in teams, are better, then like are the Warriors going to be good? I don't really think so. I don't think that they're going to be anything special, honestly. They'll be fine. You'll still have your games where it's like, well, Steph's gonna Steph, right? He's gonna do his thing, and he's gonna do enough to maybe get you into the plan. But I don't think you can continue being like, well, that's enough. It's not. It's not. Your supporting cast around him isn't good enough to really push much higher than this. Right above them, we've got a team that's in the opposite boat, where their players just are getting better, and so they're just going to improve. I've got the San Antonio Spurs. They still need some more development, right? They're not to their top level yet. They're not at their ceiling yet, but the young guards, I think, show a lot of promise, right? Stephon Castle had a great year last year. Bringing in Dylan Harper is pretty great. Getting the second overall pick, taking Dylan Harper, you love that. Pretty much everyone's pretty high on Dylan Harper, including me. And then, the elephant in the room, right? Victor Wembanyama has been incredible, right? We saw last year, even though he got injured that first half of the year, he was absolutely insane. He was blocking shots like I've never seen before. He's a really, really good basketball player, and he's living up to the hype that we made about him, which is scary. I do worry a little bit about those injuries, right? I hope he can stay healthy this year. But I think that if he can stay healthy, and then those younger guys can develop the way that I think they could, this team's going to be very, very scary. I don't think that they're going to be scary enough to be like a playoff contender, but I do think they're a team that could mess some stuff up for some playoff contenders, just because they've got such freaks of nature that it's like, if you're not careful, Wembanyama's going to get 8 blocks, and then or a triple-double with blocks. He's insane. Right above them, we've got the Dallas Mavericks. If they weren't missing Kyrie Irving, I think I'd be a little higher on them, right? Kyrie's probably going to miss the first half of the year, right? Hopefully he comes back in that second half, plays the great basketball that we know Kyrie Irving can play. But it does hurt to be missing him for a long time. D'Angelo Russell's not a bad interim, right? He's not a bad player to have as your backup, right? As your your injury reserve guy. Be like, okay, well, D'Lo, we need you to start for a while. while Kyrie's out. I think that you're fine with that. I think that he could definitely play quality minutes. He could start quality minutes. I know he has some issues, right? He's sort of inconsistent, and he's not Kyrie Irving. I know that, but he's in terms of like having him as your backup point guard, you're pretty happy with that. Uh, Hopefully AD can stay on the court for a long time, right? If you can keep him on the court and then pair him up with Cooper Flag, right? And then those good role players, those guys like the Derek Lively's and the Daniel Gaffords and the Klay Thompsons, who I think are really solid. And if you can get Flag and AD to be playing with them, I think that this team could be really solid up until Kyrie comes back. And then I think with Kyrie, they could be really good. I think that if you do struggle with injuries, right, like you did last year, if Kyrie is still out and then you're missing AD, if Flag gets injured or something like that, or the big men struggle missing time, then they could miss the play-in, right? Because you can't do much if you don't have any players to play. But if they can stay healthy and then Kyrie comes back and they look really good, I could see them jumping up into the actual playoff mix because I think this team, as of right now, is really good. They still lost the Luka trade, but I think as of right now, they're actually really good. Right above them, the last team in the plan, I've got the Memphis Grizzlies. I found the Grizzlies really hard to gauge for the last couple years. We saw John Morant have some really, really good years and look really great, and then struggle with a lot of injuries, and not just that, but also like struggled being as great when he did play, right? When he was getting minutes, it felt like he wasn't quite as impactful in some of those years. He's still got the talent. He just hasn't been taking over quite as much. But I think partially is because of the like everybody eats offense that they were doing last year, right? But I just think they need him to be a little bit better. I think this roster is good enough to make some noise, right? I think that when you look at this roster, you're like, okay, you got Ja, you've got Jaren Jackson Jr., right? You don't have Desmond Bane anymore, but maybe a guy like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who you brought in, can fill some of that hole. Ty Jerome, right, who you brought in. Zach Edey and Jalen Wells, who both had really solid rookie years. And it's like, okay, you've got some stuff. They could be good. I just don't know if it'll happen. The reason I have them at 8 over some of these other teams is I just think they've got a little less uncertainty, right? Like the Spurs, we don't know if they'll jump up. The Mavs could suffer a lot from injuries again. The Grizzlies, I think, will be at least solid. The question is, will they take that jump to being good? I don't really see it happening, but there is a world where it does, right? Now we get into the playoffs, right? The top 6 teams in the Western Conference. So these are all great teams, and I think these are all teams that could contend for a championship this year. At 6, we've got the Clippers. Now, I would have them higher if it wasn't for this Kawhi situation, and I don't know what they're going to have in terms of a punishment, right? Obviously, Steve Ballmer and the Clippers are not going to just get away with this because they are breaking the rules of the NBA. So the Clippers are going to be punished. I don't know what that's going to look like, right? Like, is that going to be like, okay, you just get fined a whole lot and Kawhi has to miss a certain amount of time, which he probably will anyway. I see all the jokes about, like, the punishment's going to be that Kawhi has to play the whole season, which I think is funny. But, like, if you're just looking at this team from a roster side of things, ignoring that punishment, right, saying that they're just going to be able to play basketball the way they normally do, then they look really good and competitive, right? We saw it in the playoffs last year. They gave the Nuggets a really good run for their money, and the Nuggets gave the champions a really good run for their money. So it's like, okay, it's this Clippers team look really good. They were better than like a first-round exit. But there's a little bit of uncertainty there just with that, pending punishment and stuff. And then on top of that, like a guy like they're such an old team. They're such an old team that it's like it's difficult for me to say, oh, well, they're all going to look really good next year because it's like, well, I don't know. Like they are old. And I think their roster fits really well together. And I think they did improve in the offseason. There's just a little bit of uncertainty because of that stuff, right? Right above them, we've got the Timberwolves. They're jumping up one spot from last year where they were 6th. 2 straight Western Conference Finals appearances tells you all you need to know, right? This team is really, really good. They haven't looked incredible in the regular season, right? They haven't looked like dominant in the regular season at all, right? Like we saw the Thunder last year, they looked dominant in the regular season. That isn't the case really for the Wolves, but Anthony Edwards has consistently improved, right? So I think we could see maybe a little bit of a jump in his playmaking because of the fact like we saw him work on his 3-point jumper so much more last year, and then came into the league. He looked like one of the best 3-point shooters in the league, was one of the best 3-point shooters in the league. And then on the other, like if he could get that playmaking to be up, which has to get up, which has been his biggest weakness. And I'm not saying he needs to be Nikola Jokic, right? He doesn't need to be the best playmaker in the league. He just needs to be passable. If he could do that, then I think this team would look really good. Or like he would look really good, and then the team around him is good enough that they're going to be a great supporting cast, right? Guys like Jaden McDaniels, guys like Rudy Gobert, guys like Julius Randle, who have consistently performed really well. I do kind of wish they'd get themselves a point guard that they could consistently play, right? Like a guy, like I know Mike Conley, he's solid, but he's not as impactful as he used to be. I know Dillingham, right? We're still kind of waiting for him to take that jump. They did bring in, was it Clifford that it was, no, because he went to the Kings, didn't he? I think I projected Clifford to go to the Wolves in one of the drafts, but I don't remember who the Timberwolves actually took. Oh yeah, Joan Behringer, who I had gone off the board a little later, I think, which is I think why I forgot that they took him. But I mean, I think they've got really solid talent around Anthony Edwards, and if he could take another jump, then I think they could kind of capitalize on that. They could maybe get a little higher or maybe could drop a little lower, but come playoff time, I don't think anyone, especially the Nuggets, wants to play the Minnesota Timberwolves. Right above them, I've got the Lakers, the team that the Timberwolves knocked out of the playoffs last year. I think a whole year of LeBron and Luka is going to be great for that team. Plus, I think DeAndre Ayton fits in really well, especially since we've seen Luka elevate the level of those like lob catching big men really well. I still don't trust the defense of this team. Right, DeAndre Ayton does not fix that. I know people keep being like, Luka's slimmed down. He's going to be good at defense this year. I don't trust that until I see it. The depth I still don't really trust, but they're built to win, right? They're built to win, and I think that this year they could win, especially come playoff time, right? Like I think this is another team like the Wolves that they're going to look better come playoffs. And if this seeding did, if I get everything right here, which let's be for real is not going to happen, but if it did, then we'd see a Lakers Wolves first round rematch, which would be kind of fun. Maybe they, the Lakers could stop Rudy Gobert from having 20 and 20 this time. I still don't trust all of the aspects of this Lakers team, but I think it's one of those teams that's like they might be scarier than their seeding shows, if that makes sense. Right above them, I've got the Rockets. I think the addition of Kevin Durant is huge. It's exactly what they needed, I think. Obviously, they needed another consistent scoring option. I already talked a lot about this KD trade in one of the earlier episodes, but they needed a consistent scorer, right? Jalen Green, he's a good scorer if he's feeling it, but if he's not, then he's inconsistent. But Kevin Durant is always a good scorer. Kevin Durant is consistently great. He's Kevin Durant, you know who he is. And they shored up the bench a little more. They didn't lose a whole lot of depth for Kevin Durant, right? Losing Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks is not bad when you're bringing in Kevin Durant. They didn't lose out on too many important pieces. I know they're going to be missing Fred VanVleet for part of the time next year, but I think they're still going to be really good, right? You look at Şengün, you look at Durant, you look at Amen Thompson, who should take a jump, and you just look at that team, you're like, they could be really, really good next year. I don't know what they'll look like come playoff time, right? I don't know if I really see them as the third best team, but I think they're going to be really interesting. I do. I think that's going to be one of my favorite things to watch next year is to see how Kevin Durant fits into that team. Now the top two, I've got the Nuggets at two. I think this is the next. This is the best Nuggets team since they won a championship. They're going to make some noise, right? They've still got the best player in the world in Nikola Jokic. They've got Cam Johnson, who I thought was a great pickup. I think that he fits MPJ's role, but also does stuff that MPJ can't, right? He's more confident in that handle. He's a better playmaker. He's a slightly better defender. Bruce Brown, bringing him back, I think that's just good for morale, good for energy. I think it's just kind of fun, right? I do wish they could have brought Russ back because Bruce Brown and Russ off the bench would have been such a fun duo. Jonas was a big pickup as well, right? Like him playing actual backup center minutes for Jokic is huge. I think his floor spacing will be big too. Like he's a solid 3-point shooting center. The spacing of this team just looks a lot better. The depth of this team just looks a lot better. And those were the two of the biggest weaknesses. Their defense doesn't look significantly better, but it doesn't look worse, right? They maybe a little bit better even. And I just think this team is going to look really good. I think honestly, this is the best chance the Nuggets have had to win a championship since they won a championship. And honestly, roster to roster, this team might even be better. I do think their competition level is a little higher, especially with the first team, which is the Oklahoma City Thunder as the first seed. I think that's going to be difficult for the Nuggets to beat the Thunder, difficult for them to beat the Wolves too. But I think they gave the Thunder a really solid run for their money last year, and now you're looking at the Nuggets team. You're like, they're better this year. They could maybe sneak that out. Talking about OKC though, they brought back the championship court, right? They saw what happened last year. They decided, let's do it again, right? Which I think is the smart move. Their defense was absolutely incredible last year. Their offense was nothing to scoff at either. They should be elite again, right? That's pretty much all I've got to say about the Thunder is they're going to be really good again because they're still young and they're still great. And they've still got that same core, right? Exactly what we saw from last year. I think they're going to be great. They're going to be really good. And that's my total standings predictions, right? We'll talk, like I said, next time about awards and who I think the players are going to be that really elevate their team's level a lot. We'll see how these predictions pan out. I know that it is unlikely that they'll be great. I know I missed a lot last year, but I think this year, going in, I feel pretty confident about all of these, but we'll see, right? Injuries change stuff, trades change stuff, just the NBA changes stuff. So we'll see. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys let me know, what your predictions are, right? If you think that I have one team way too low and one team way too high, drop it in the comments of the YouTube video or hit me up, Just Talk Hoops on Instagram. I hope you guys had a fun time listening to this, and I will see you next time. Have a good week, guys.